Here's actually a really good question. Technology is so critical in today's banking world, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But there are some banks, before I came over to KeyBank, I was at Wells Fargo. Wells, their business model was that we will develop everything in-house on the technology side, maintain it in-house, so that we can ensure the proper customer experience. KeyBank's business model is, you know what? There are some great fintechs, financial technology companies out there that eat and breathe and sleep 24/7, this one little tiny segment of the technology world that financial institutions use, like the pay button, for instance. Is that worthwhile to really staff up a whole department to maintain every little tiny piece of technology that there is? Or should we team up with some of the very best in the country who do that day in and day out? There are times where KeyBank has actually purchased, an example is this company called Hello Wallet. They used to go around and market to all kinds of companies about financial health for their employees. We loved it so much we actually ended up buying Hello Wallet, and it's now integrated within the KeyBank platform. If you go onto our website, you can do a financial health assessment. You can put in some information that is private to you, isn't used for anything else. It'll give you a health wellness score. It'll tell you what areas you're lacking. You can watch online videos to educate yourself more on that one little aspect of your financial health to raise your score up. Things like that. We have found that the biggest stressor in people's lives is financial. And do I have enough money to retire? Do I have enough money to send my kid to school? I'm living paycheck to paycheck. How can I afford a car? Things like that, that people just don't know on that. And so really one of KeyBank's missions for the last couple of years has been this financial education. And we have a company called, not a company, sorry, a team member, actually 2 or 3 here in Utah, that do Key at Work. And they go out to businesses and they basically become a financial advisor to the employees of those businesses. And people sign up for one-on-one discussions with them, and they just sit down and really help them out on their financial advice. So thanks for that question. Are you ready to go? Okay, let's just jump right in, and then probably by what I say, you'll probably have a bunch more questions that come up. So anyway, thank you for the invitation to be here. I've been looking forward since Dennis and others extended the invitation to me. I've been looking forward to this opportunity to be with you today. Let me just quickly tell you just a little bit about KeyBank and KeyCorp before we jump in to what I'd like to talk about. But let me just put a disclosure up front as I think about this. As I was putting some of my thoughts together, I thought I typically, it's not in my nature to talk about myself a lot. I usually like to, my style is to praise my leaders around me. But today's presentation is going to be a lot about me because of the way I want to go through and kind of give you 10 things that I've learned through my career. And part of that is talking about me and my career. So don't take it the wrong way that I'm talking a lot about myself, because typically I don't do it. But anyway, so KeyBank, we're the 13th largest bank in the country, headquartered in Cleveland, Ohio. We're in 15 states from Maine to Alaska, right across the northern part of the US. So there's 4 kinds of banks, categories of banks, I should say. There's the gazillionaire banks that we call the money center banks. You know those, Citi, Bank of America, JP Morgan, Chase, and Wells Fargo, those 4. Then there's the next category, and that's where KeyBank fits in with US Bank and some other, we're called super regional banks, where we're in quite a few different states, but we're not in every state. And we don't have trillion-dollar balance sheets. So, and then under that is the regional banks. That would be more like a Zions Bank that is in 2 or 3 or 4 states. And then under that is the last category, and that's community banks that are just basically in one state and in a few communities within that state. We have some great community banks here in this state. I'm honored to sit on the board of Utah Bankers Association with and get to know them. So we value diversity at KeyBank. I just want to make sure I say this right. We've won a lot of awards, including 8-time winner of the best places to work for LGBTQ people equality, 6-time winner in Diversity Inc.'s top 50 companies for diversity. In fact, we're the only major bank in the country that's run by a woman. And Beth Mooney is her name. And I am so proud to be associated with a bank that's inclusive and that really says, bring your authentic self to work every day. You can't be better if you don't bring your authentic self. If you try to be someone else who you're really not, you're not going to be at your very best. So our bank is very much about diversity and making sure we have all those different people coming together to serve our clients, which is about 3 million nationwide. We're driven by what is called the community bank model. So there's 5 big banks in town. I work for 4 of the 5 now. The last one I won't work with because it's just not who I am culturally. But well, in fact, this is where I'll retire, is KeyBank. So. But our community bank model is this. When I was at Wells, I'll give you an example. I was overseeing the commercial banking division there. We had, by far and away, the majority of the largest companies in Utah. Big companies who needed a lot of different product services and a large balance sheet. So I would have smaller companies that we call middle market companies, about 20 million in annual revenues and larger, come to me and they would say, Terry, you know, we love the services and products you're providing, but we really miss our community bank that we started with. And that actually kind of hurt a little bit. But I got it, because at community bank feel, you know, you get to go eyeball to eyeball with the decision maker, you get to build this relationship, but they're so small that as your company starts growing, you outgrow their capabilities. And then you have to go to a bigger bank that has more capabilities and a larger balance sheet to get larger type of loans, working capital loans. So I got that. So when I came over to KeyBank, I thought, how can I and our team here at KeyBank embrace this model of acting and feeling like a community bank? So all those fuzzy things and good things that you think about as a community bank, but have the capabilities of one of the largest banks in the country. So if you can marry those two things together, that community bank model has been very powerful. And in fact, of the last 4 years, including this year, KeyBank Utah will be one of the top 3 markets in the country, the 27. And last year we won Market of the Year for the first time ever. So it's that feel that we're really going for. So we have a little over 300 Utah-based employees, 36 branches across the Wasatch Front. We were started in Ogden, Utah by the Hemingway family when they combined 3 banks together and made it Commercial Security Bank. And then in 1988, KeyBank came and acquired Commercial Security Bank and First Idaho Trust, the sister bank to that. And KeyBank came into the states of Idaho and Utah with that and brought their brand and their capabilities. So as I mentioned, today I'm going to share with you 10 of the many lessons. I've learned so many lessons along my path of my professional journey, but I'd like to share 10 lessons with you. But first, let me ask you this. I know I really appreciate getting to know a little bit who you guys are, what year you are, and you're majoring in business primarily. Did anyone, as they were growing up, think, someday I want to be a banker? No? You did? I love you. I can tell you, I have asked that question so many times, and typically no one raises their hand. So, well, not everything, but thank you for that. What's your country? Albania. Okay, wonderful. Huh? I have actually had some Albanians visit Utah. About a year ago, they sent a delegation here to Utah, and I hosted them at KeyBank when they came to visit the governor and see some things. So we have shared some commonalities there with the state of Utah. So I love banking too. We get to help companies grow, create more jobs that feed families. We get to help individuals meet their financial dreams. It's all about relationships. So I have absolutely loved my banking career. But typically, I call it accidental bankers. Most of us fall into banking accidentally, somehow. So shortly after I was married, I met my wife at ZCMI store. Remember ZCMIs? These guys probably do. But But it was a large department store in the state of Utah. And I worked in sporting goods. She worked in books right next door, books and stationery. We met, we married, we moved to Denver, Colorado. My job was working with amateur sports clubs in the evening, gymnastics clubs and ice skating clubs. So I had the day free. We were dirt poor. My wife was working as a receptionist at a trucking company, and I thought, okay, what can I do to help earn money? I shouldn't be sitting around all day twiddling my thumbs in the day and then working in the evening until late. So I opened the Denver Post. In those days, this is how you found jobs. You look in the help wanted ads in the Denver Post, and there was a job for a peak time teller. And peak time is people would come in during lunch hours and other certain times of the day to do their banking. And they would wait in line 10, 15, 20 minutes to be with their teller because they had a relationship with that teller. They knew each other's families, whatever. In fact, I'll give you a little, probably shouldn't tell you how old I am, but when I was a teller there, and so I applied for that job, got it. When I was a teller, ATMs had just been introduced. Nobody wanted to use a machine to do their banking. So we would have competitions on the teller line. Who could send the most people down to the ATM to get a demonstration on how to use one? And I was joking recently with one of our retail leaders, and I said, we ought to have a demonstration on how it is to bank with a real live person anymore, because you know what? Over 90% of the transactions that come into banks today are through your mobile devices and your PC, your computers. Everyone, including myself. It is technology. We talked a little bit about that. Technology has come so far. At the time in Colorado, there was no branch banking. What that means is each branch, each bank stood on its own. They had its own president, its own infrastructure, everything. If I was at Central Bank of Denver in downtown Denver, somebody came to me from Central Bank of Colorado Springs or Central Bank of Aspen, I couldn't help them. They weren't on my computer system because there was no branch banking. So we got acquired by First Bank Systems out of Minneapolis, St. Paul. It later became US Bank. First acquisition in the state of Colorado. You can imagine how inefficient we were in the state of Colorado. So probably, I think it was something like 40% of the people at central banks, they bought all 8 central banks, including the one I worked at, Central Bank of Denver, 40% of the people got laid off. Lesson number 1 is open and willing to adapt to change. If you're not willing to adapt to the new circumstances, those are the people who ended up actually leaving their job, not having a job after the end. So I was able to stay on with the bank as I went into the manager of the international department. I loved international. I still do today. In fact, I got my MBA from an international graduate school in Arizona. And I went to him, his name was Roy, and I went to Roy and said, teach me about your department. I went from the teller department to commercial loan servicing. I was in the credit department now of the commercial bank. And I went to the international side and asked him, and we still have stayed in touch. And he truly became a mentor. And I learned all about the different products and services that banks offer for the international companies and people who need those international services. Yet, all those people that got laid off were my friends. And it left scars. And I thought as I went off to graduate school, why would I want to stay in banking? I'd been 5 years now at Central Bank of Denver, now First Bank Systems. And I thought, why would I want to stay in a bank, in an industry that is going to continue to consolidate? So I went off to graduate school, as I mentioned. In fact, there's a good thing on learning how to adapt to change. I don't know if anybody's ever read this book. It's really simple, but it's sort of, Who Moved My Cheese? Has anybody read that? But a couple of you. But anyway, this is one of my favorite sayings in there, that adapt to change quickly. The quicker you let go of the old cheese, the sooner you can enjoy the new cheese. Basically, what they do is they trained all these mice to go to one spot to get their cheese. They moved the cheese. The mice who couldn't adapt to change basically died. And those that could found the new cheese and was able to move on. In the world of finance and banking, I think I mentioned a little bit about how quickly our industry has been changing. Incredible pace, incredible pace. And we've truly been disrupted by technology. And as I said, that's a good thing. But we have, as banks, need to learn how to adjust. We need to learn how to make things easier. We need to learn how to make things more efficient, or we die. It's that simple. So I finished up my degrees I mentioned in Arizona, convinced I didn't want to go back into banking. So I interviewed with tons of different companies. And and the job market was really tight when I graduated with my MBA. And because I had 5 years of banking, I got 3 job offers. And yeah, you guessed it, all 3 were banks. Even though I didn't want to get back into banking. But I'm so glad the circumstances happened that way because I've had an incredible career. So the 3 banks, 2 were domestic US banks, 1 was a Canadian bank, Royal Bank of Canada. I did my research and I found out that Canada had already gone through their consolidations. There's really only 5 banks in Canada, all big, coast-to-coast banks, Royal Bank being the largest of those. And since they had already gone through that consolidation, I had those scars. I felt, you know what, I'm going to join the Canadian bank. So with that, they sent me out, myself and my family, out to Los Angeles. And however, somehow I caught the eye of head office while I was out in LA, and they ended up moving me up to Canada, to Toronto, Canada, with my family. So that brings me to lesson 2, is don't be afraid of new experiences. Here we are as a young family. I had 2 daughters at the time. And my family had never lived outside the Western US, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, now California. And here we are moving back east and to a different country. As my wife and I talked about the opportunity to move back east, we felt that the experience and the opportunity of working in head office would be something that would pay off for us in the end. So was it just a little bit frightening to move my young family with 2 small children to a different country? Absolutely it was. Was there doubt that I could even make it in a different country with a different culture? Yeah, I certainly had those doubts. But at the end of the day, if I would have given in to the fears of doubt, I would not be where I am today. You see, I was hired by Bank One, coming out of Manhattan. We'll go in there in just a minute. But some 15 years later, after that decision to move to Toronto, and I was hired because of the experiences that I had had in Toronto and New York City that differentiated me from the other bankers that they were looking to hire here in Utah to run Bank One at the time, now Chase, Bank One's commercial division. So it was that decision. I can directly look to that for how I was able to get back to Utah. So don't be afraid of new experiences, either moving to a different organization or trying something new, or even a different environment or country, to learn and grow and differentiate yourself from others. So here I am in Canada, working with some of the largest Canadian companies. I was in the multinational corporate bank division. I worked with Labatt Breweries, Canadian Pacific, a large conglomerate up there in Canada, runs railroads and hotels and all kinds of things. Nestle Canada, Sears Canada, these were all my accounts. What a great opportunity I had as a younger banker to do that. And a lot of times, I know it was either directly said or implied of how did this Yank get this job, this sweet job here in Canada? And why wasn't it a Canadian who got this job? I had to learn fast how to be culturally sensitive and adapt really fast, which brings me to point 3. Be culturally sensitive, both internally and externally. I learned about the Canadian culture, strive to understand the perspective of their neighbors to the south, us here in the US. Learned Canadian history, got involved in their religion, ice hockey. And in fact, my Canadian clients used to love to teach this Yank about their game in hockey. And it was just a lot of fun. You know, but at the same time, within each company, there's also a different culture. Later, when I became employed by a French bank in Manhattan, very different than the Canadian bank's culture. As I mentioned, I worked at Wells Fargo before I came to KeyBank. Very Wells Fargo culture, very different than KeyBank's culture. Each entity that I have had the privilege of working with has had a different culture that you need to learn how to adapt. So both externally of where you live and the people around you, but internally as well. I think this cartoon illustrates it pretty well. How we think differently. See, both of these women are right from their perspective and from their value system. One believes that women are being oppressed in the other's culture and therefore they have to cover themselves. The other believes that due to the other woman's culture, she has to flaunt herself. Very different perspectives, but you know what? Because they're based on culture, those perspectives are both right. But it's just a different way of looking at things, isn't it? So if you're to be successful, learn and understand the culture of the company you're working for and the culture of the places around you. 2 months before my 3-year mark in Canada, and I remember that because I was going for my Canadian citizenship, because you don't have to give up your US, and you have to be there 3 years as a landed immigrant, and so I was almost so close. A group had left at Royal Bank of Canada's New York office, and the bank asked me now to, since I was a US expat, to go down and run this group for them in New York. Our family, we had learned to love Canada. My youngest daughter was born in Canada. She's my little Canuck, and we just loved it up there. But we knew this move to New York City and running a group there would be a great opportunity for me and to experience new things. Then a couple years with our Royal Bank in New York, I ended up, another long story, but it was just, I ended up moving over to a French bank, Credit Lyonnais. I ran a global group for them out of New York. Had to be in Paris 9-10 times a year for head office meetings. They asked me to sit on the board of Bank of Hawaii because they did a lot of stuff together in the French Polynesian Islands. Had a board seat that I represented the bank on. I traveled a lot. Let's just say I also had a daily 4-hour commute, 2 hours in, 2 hours back from my home in New Jersey. So I was away a lot. And I give all the credit in the world to my beautiful wife for raising 3 amazing daughters. But I sacrificed being away for our family, which brings me to point number 4. Know what you're willing to sacrifice for your job. Know what those boundaries are. You must be on the same page with your spouse or your significant other. If you do not have that honest, open conversation with both of you agreeing on what you're both willing to sacrifice in order for one or both of you to further your careers, then there's not going to be happiness in the home. And when there's not happiness where you live outside of work, there's not a lot of happiness where you work. And your career and personal life will both suffer. I saw that a lot in New York, by the way. A lot of people sacrificing a lot of things, and they weren't very happy people. Were they making money? Yeah, they were making some big time money, but not very happy. Luckily, both my wife Janet and I agreed on the sacrifices that we were willing to make for each other and with our family in the hopes that the rewards would come to fruition sometime in the future. So I spent 10 great years in New York as a banker. Then an event happened that would change our lives and give us a pause. It happened on September 11th, 2001. People know it as 9/11. I lost 2 very good close friends in that tragedy. Even to this day, this picture, I just took this picture with my phone off the wall. This picture hangs in my office. Wherever I go, that day, I felt very black and white. And there was a vendor right outside of 1 Wall Street, which is where Bank of New York was. I had a meeting that first morning on September 12th. First morning, you still saw the smoldering coming up, saw the dogs going around trying to find bodies or people alive even still at that point in time. And there was a street vendor who was selling that picture, this black and white photo. I didn't know at the time that I lost 2 friends, but this is my way of remembering them, those 2 twin towers for my 2 friends that I lost. But there are times in life, and it could be a death, it could be a sickness, a tragic situation, or what happened to me, a tragic accident 2.5 years ago that left my wife in a state of unresponsiveness, in a vegetative state, I should say, probably. But you know what? Life happens. And when things like that happen, you have to take a step back. We're all going to face major issues in our lives. Some of you might have already faced these in your life. Maybe you've lost a parent or whatever, I don't know. But each one of us are going to face something in our life. And we need to make sure that our priorities match our current values and where we are. It might be that we stay on the course, or it might be that we change course. So back when 9/11 occurred, back then it was when a terrorist attack was going to happen again, not if another terrorist attack was going to happen. So for our family, the decision was made that life was too short, and perhaps I shouldn't be hanging my hat every day in Manhattan being the #1 terrorist target of the world. So our children had never lived around family. Our parents were aging. Our priorities now were making sure that our daughters would have a father in their life and not to be lost to another terrorist event. However, I had a great job. I schmoozed like 60% of the time. Unlimited expense account. By policy, I had to fly first class. I mean, it was a pretty decent job. I could drop $1,000 at a Yankees game and nobody would blink. I mean, it was a good job. So when I went to quit, after I'd find my job, New Yorkers just couldn't believe that I was leaving this job. Then when they heard that I was moving to Utah, they didn't even think civilization happened west of Mississippi, but maybe Los Angeles and San Francisco, Chicago. But other than that, no, there's not even civilization. So they just thought I needed to be committed to some loony boon. But anyway, but we moved our family back to Utah. I knew I would take a pay cut. There's no way I was going to earn the same salary here in Utah that I was earning in New York. But you know what? That's okay. I was perfectly okay with that because priorities in life had changed. Something had happened. An event happened that changed our outlook and our priorities in life. So you have to have the courage to reevaluate and change your circumstances. You know what? That actually brought me to 5. Life's events will happen. And be open to reevaluating your priorities. So after 9/11 happened, I networked and I found this job at Bank One. Again, they hired me because, in fact, I'll tell you what the hiring person said to me. He said, you know, Terry, we don't know what we don't know. You bring a whole different set of experiences and skills than anybody else here in the state of Utah. And that's why I was hired, because I was willing to take those chances earlier on in my career. Then everything was going great at Bank One. We were one of the top divisions in the country. And then that little old bank called JP Chase came along, acquired Bank One. The gentleman who had hired me, who had become a regional head, they were not organized the same way. Chase was not. He came back to run Utah. I was running Utah. I knew it wasn't going to work. So I went off to US Bank and ran a team. And then after only 1 year at US Bank, I was given an opportunity to start a brand new bank. Now, in my world of banking, you just don't go starting banks every day. I never even thought that I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. I saw a couple of you raise your hands. And I love entrepreneurs. My parents were entrepreneurs. I have 3 younger brothers. They're entrepreneurs. I'm the only oddball that has this 9-to-5 job and have to report to someone else, you know. With that, I just felt like I had put on my entrepreneurial hat and go give it the old college try, as they say. So I was the chief credit and lending officer. Myself and 2 others, we raised $40 million to start our bank and here in Utah. And it was going pretty well. But then, you know what I found out about myself that I never knew was that I don't make a very good small bank banker. I'm too transparent, too open, as I found out, and being the chief credit and lending officer, I was supposed to build the commercial bank, and I'd tell companies to go to a different bank because we couldn't give them what they needed. I knew what they needed, and we didn't have the arrows in the quiver, the products and services, so to say, to be able to help them. Now, later on, did that help me out? Yeah, because they knew that I was honest with them and that I wasn't just trying to sell them something. And so I had to basically reevaluate myself and say, you know what, this just isn't who I am, which leads me to next point number 6, be willing to cut bait and move on. So sometimes we get ourselves in a situation or circumstances that sound great at the time, but as we grow and we learn more about ourselves, we realize we need to just move on. But we have to have the courage to do it. It's tough. It wasn't easy to leave Bank One. That was my first job back to Utah. We were still getting settled. I'd only been there a year. And it wasn't easy to leave US Bank either, to start a brand new bank. But I just felt at the time it was the right thing for me to do. But now, over a year and a half, 2 years later, it wasn't the right thing anymore for me to do. I got it off the ground. Things were going well. I'd opened an office in Austin, Texas, and in Florida, Jacksonville. And so we had all kind of our time zones covered, what we were trying to accomplish, but it just wasn't right for me. So I gave my 6-month notice to the board. I hired my replacement. Indicated at the very beginning of the year, January 2nd, I'd start looking for a new job. I had no idea where I was going to go, what I was going to do, but I knew I had to do something. So it was time to cut bait and move on. This quote brings me to the next point. The only people with whom you should try to get even are those who have helped you. Thank goodness I had a really strong network. A network of individuals that I went to leave. Along life's paths, you're going to find people who take a real interest in you, each and every one of you. And these people who take an interest in you and your career, you got to make sure you really are very thankful for them. So point number 7 is your network is invaluable. Here's what happened to me. In leaving, Proficio Bank was the name of the bank. It's now part of Cache Valley Bank. I didn't know where I was going to go. I put my resume out to 2 or 3 people. One of the gentlemen at Wells Fargo, who ran 8 states for Wells Fargo, was a close personal friend of mine that I had met at a place called Leadership Utah through the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce. And Dave was his name, and Dave said, you know what, Terry, we don't have a job right now open for you, but just come over. We'll figure out what to do with you once you get here, but we just want you on the team. Now, do you think that he would have said that if we were just getting to know each other? Do you think he would have said that if we had not invested the time over years of building up trust with one another? So your network is invaluable. In fact, down at BYU, about a year or so ago, I did a whole hour-and-a-half presentation on building your network, and we tried a whole bunch of different things, and it was really a lot of fun for all of us involved, but it is a really deep topic, and something that is just so valuable. So I have relied on my network many, many times over the years, both professionally and personally. After the accident that I mentioned to you, I can't tell you how many people rallied around me. It was incredible. It was incredible. So personal networks too are just as critical as professional. Let me caution you on one thing though about building your professional career. There's this thing called networking bias. And basically you go to a networking event and you meet somebody and you try to ask a couple questions right away to get to know if they can help you. If they can become a customer, or they can help you do this or do that. Whatever it is that you're motivated to be at that networking event for. And if they're not, you just politely discard them and you move on to the next person until you're trying to find these people. Well, you know what? That bias, that networking bias, you don't know who they know. You don't know how they can help you. So if you're going to a networking event and you go there with the idea of how can I help others, and each person is important, it's so different, so different. That's how you build people with trust. That's how, I mean, think about networking bias and you just discarded somebody because they couldn't, let's say if I was a middle market commercial banker and I'm banking companies 20 million and above. This company is only 5 million in annual revenues. They can't be my client. I'm going to just get rid of them so I can go find the $20 million company people who are here. Well, you know what? Their next door neighbor, the person you just discarded, could be your number one prospect's next door neighbor and best friend. But you don't know that. So each person is important. And just always think about what you can do for them and not what they can do for you. And you know what? If you do the right things and you help people, it always comes back to you. It always does. KeyBank courted me for several months. As I told you, I kind of had that Wells Fargo stagger. I don't know how a nice way to say it. But being very proud of working at Wells Fargo. You know, we were the stagecoach, we were the biggest, we were the best. It got him in trouble, didn't it? Anyway, but I said no to KeyBank twice. Finally, they asked me to fly back to their head office in Cleveland and meet the top executives of the bank in Cleveland. I felt I owed it to them. They had spent so much time, energy on me that I said, you know what, okay, I'll do this. They said, you can interview them as much as they interview you, just see if it's the right fit. So I said, all right, we'll do it. So, supposed to arrive the night before. My first meeting was 8 a.m. with the CEO of the company, Beth Mooney, who I mentioned to you. And what happened was the weather did not cooperate. And my flight into Detroit was delayed. There's no direct flights between Cleveland and Salt Lake. There is now, but not then. Anyway, by the time I arrived in Detroit, the last plane of the day had left for Cleveland. And they said, we can get you in at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning in Cleveland, but that was too late. I would have missed the CEO of the bank if I would have done that. I saw at the gate right next door was a plane taking off for Pittsburgh, and I knew, having lived in New Jersey for a long time, that Pittsburgh was closer than Detroit was to Cleveland. So I jumped on that plane. I went to Pittsburgh. I rented a car at midnight, and at 3:30 a.m. I rolled into Cleveland in time for my 8 o'clock meeting with Beth Mooney the next morning. Which brings me to lesson 8. Be flexible and think outside the box. Life is going to throw different things at you. Circumstances are going to be thrown at you all the time. Now, if I had not been willing to do what it took to make sure I was at that meeting the next morning, I might not be where I am today. I might not be with KeyBank, probably not in a way, and having the incredible experiences that I've been experiencing the last 5 years. I can give you many other examples in my life and my career where being flexible and thinking about different solutions that might not be the most obvious and alternatives have really been rewarded. Let me return to that day, that first meeting with Beth Mooney. So everyone who had been talking to me are men, right? Us men, we like to intellectually tell you why this makes sense for you to do something. So I had, I don't know about you, but sometimes I made these little T accounts, pluses, minuses, and all these different things about decisions that come along as I think through them. Well, Beth, she just forgot about all that. Women sometimes have a way of going right here to the heart, forgetting about this, bypassing this, go straight to the heart. And what she said was, and I'll never forget it, she said, Terry, every once in a while, life offers you different opportunities. And typically, most of the time, the best opportunities come at the most inopportune time. And it's what you do with those things that are making it an inopportune time that will define you as a person and as a professional. That really hit me hard. And she went on then to share some very personal and intimate details about her life and some of the decisions she had to make and what the circumstances were. And here she is. She was named Banker of the Year, not Women Banker of the Year, but Banker of the Year, going as Jamie Dimon and all these others. She's an incredible person. She's actually retiring in May 1st, and I'm going to miss her dearly, but have really enjoyed getting to know her. So, brings me to the 9th point, take hold of opportunities when they are presented. Define what might be keeping you from moving on or forward to different opportunities. Then develop a plan to overcome those roadblocks so that you can move on those opportunities if they're right for you. Because you're going to be presented with opportunities that might not be right for you. You've got to really talk and think, and if you believe in something higher, pray about it, and whatever you do to come up to decisions. However, waiting on the couch for opportunities to show up just doesn't happen in real life. I love this quote. I grew up in one of the very first MLM families in this state. Back when I was 11 years old, my parents joined Amway Corporation. And so every time I got into the car, there's this guy named Zig Ziglar on the phone, the tapes that we were listening to, actually 8-tracks or whatever they were, I don't know, and all the different things. But I grew up hearing this. And I love Zig. I've met him several times. Success occurs when opportunity meets preparation. This is very true. As you prepare yourself, right now, you're in class learning skills, learning things that are going to prepare yourself. When you're all the different life's experience are preparing you for different things. As you build your network, if you have experiences, as you pick yourself up after falling down, all these things will prepare you to meet opportunity when that comes, because you'll be prepared to accept that opportunity. The most successful people go out and make it happen. They do not wait around for someone else to make them successful. So The last thing I would like to share with you, then we'll open up. How are we doing on time? Okay, I only have one more thing. Last thing is, in overseeing Utah for KeyBank the last 5 years, my last life lesson is that people matter. I really value diversity and inclusion and respect others' points of view. We don't have a lot of that in today's world, in this country. That interpersonal skill of respecting individuals for who they are, not attempting to categorize them by gender, by ethnicity, by generation or age, by sexuality, by school loyalties, or other things that we sometimes try to categorize people into. Political views would be another big one, left and the right, or wherever you stand on the spectrum, the political spectrum. We need to not be so judgmental and accept others and embrace diversity. We're all attempting in life to just do the best we can. And does that mean we can't improve? No, we all can improve. Because of my wife and I accident 2.5 years ago, so many people, I'm in a club that I never wanted to be a member of, but so many people have come up and told me things that are happening in their own personal lives. I never would have had ever imagined that that would be happening in their lives, because I only knew them professionally. So just don't judge, because we just don't know what's on each other's plates. Sometimes, I know my physique sometimes doesn't show that, but sometimes I do work out at the Alta Club downtown Salt Lake, and I'll watch CNN in the morning, and then and hear the news that's going on, and then I'll watch Fox at night when I go back home. Same story. It's like two different stories though. It is so different. And they're both right, just like that cartoon had. They both think that they're the most trusted source in news or whatever they say. But it's so different the way the people, the panelists they put on, the experts, how they put their little phrases on the bottom of the screen. Same story, very different. So I just want to challenge you to think differently, to talk to people who are not like you, to see their point of view. Go to news sources that isn't you. If you're very liberal, go to something very conservative, or vice versa, and rate those points of view and see what others are thinking. It will pay off, because diversity does matter. Okay, that's all. Those are my 10 things. Do I have just 1 or 2 minutes for a couple questions? Okay, what kind? Yeah.
You mentioned culture being very important to you.
Uh-huh.
I study leadership, and it's something that I've been focused on for the past couple of years. Wells Fargo hasn't been in the highest light for its leadership in the past little bit. You know, you have the Phantom accounts and separation between executives and the working class, or whatever they called it. Did that contribute to your decision to leave Wells Fargo?
So I left Wells Fargo prior to that all hitting the fan. So I've been 5 years now at KeyBank, a little over 5 years actually. 5 years last fall. That happened within the last 3 years. But did I thank my lucky stars that I had moved? Let me just say this. Wells Fargo over the years has spent billions on creating an image of themselves, on their marketing, on being a trusted brand, on being a good corporate citizen, on treating their customers right, and within days, all those years and all that money, gone. It is so critical that reputation risk is real. And you need to make sure that you're always doing the right things. And their shareholders have made a lot of people pay at Wells Fargo because of that, their board and their shareholders. So that did not contribute, but it would have if I was still there, but it did not, because I didn't know the circumstances at the time. Well, who else? Yeah.
One of the fears that I've read about regarding the implementation of ATMs was the fear of like automating a teller's job. But I hear that what essentially happened was that it reallocated their time to more important tasks.
Exactly right.
Is there any current fears in banking with automation as of now?
I think there was a period of time over the last couple decades, certainly. I remember a lot of people fearing for their job because technology was going to replace them in financial services. I think today, everyone involved, we really embrace it, and does allow us to do more personal interactions. Today, I've closed 6 branches since I've come in that are within a mile apart, because our branches are so, well, I think of our branches as problem resolution centers, because people don't want to call an 800 number, so they'll do as much as they can online, but if there's a problem, they want to speak to a real person. I think of them as loan centers. So a lot of people don't want to go in and input this very sensitive data and hit enter and hope it goes to the right spot. They want to go in and have somebody help guide them through a mortgage application or a car loan application or whatever it is. And then I think of our branches really as our frontline public service kind of people. So do we have as many tellers? No. In fact, we're moving to a model, half of our branches are going to be converted this year, where we're not even going to have a teller line. And they're going to come in, you're going to be meted right away, you're going to be sat down at a desk. Every person, from the branch manager to each person in that branch, the 3 or 4 that will be there at any given time, can do everything that you want them to do right there at their desk. And you don't have to come into this desk and then go up to the teller line to do this and then go over. Right there, they can help y'all. And then they can talk to you about other things that might be important to you and help guide you too. So technology only enhances. I think that's the general feeling today, and not that it's a threat. How about a young woman, then I'll come to you. Is there any young women who'd like to ask a question?
I'd like to ask one before I knew you would come. I just saw your LinkedIn profile, and I was looking at your jobs, and I just want to ask, what was your really first job?
My very first job, have you heard of Taco Bell? Yes, you have. I was too young to be actually employed, but I cleaned the toilets and I cleaned the windows and stuff, and they paid me by food because my neighbor was the manager of the Taco Bell. And then I got a paper route after that. So yes, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I wanted to ask, so how many banks did you work at, like individual banks altogether?
Oh boy, let's see, Central Bank of Denver, and then Royal Bank, and then Credit Lyonnais, Bank One, US Bank, Proficio Bank, Wells Fargo, now KeyBank.
So 8 altogether, and
Yep.
then the follow-up question was, which bank paid you the best salary?
It would definitely have been Credit Lyonnais. The French, it was owned by the government, and they didn't really care about expenses or the bottom line. Let's just say bonus time was a really great time at the Grant home. However, I wouldn't look at it that way. What bank provided you the most support and made you the happiest that you wanted to get out of bed for? And it's not always financially, it's not always money. You can work for an amazing bank reputation. You go in there and your boss is just horrible. Your coworkers are horrible. It is toxic. You do not want to be there. They might be paying you a great salary, but it's not a place you want to be. That's not a place you can thrive. That's not where you can be your best. So for me right now, it's KeyBank. That accident that I mentioned a couple times, if I was at Wells Fargo, my team here in Utah would have supported me, no doubt about it. We had a great relationship, still do. But everyone from the CEO, the head of human resources, the president of the entire bank, they're all sending me notes, they're sending me flowers, it has been so incredible, like a family, or here in the West we call it circling the wagons. They have come together to support me. That's worth more than money to me. Anything else? Yes?
Do you feel that all your experiences and decisions that you've made have been worth your sacrifices?
Yes, yes. One of my points right here, you got to be willing to cut bait and move on. At the time, it was absolutely the right decision. Now, did circumstances or other things change? Priorities sometimes? Different things happen in your lives? You got to have the courage to change and not say, you know what, I made this decision, come hell or high water, I'm going to stick with it, and just cut bait sometimes. But I love every decision I made, even though sometimes being the chief credit, so we opened this in 2000, this bank that I started, we opened in 2008. Not a great time to open a bank. Let me just say that, right? We were building a national mortgage platform across the country, and here the largest mortgage company in California is shutting its doors. Not a great time. There was times I would go home and just crawl up in the fetal position and not want to talk to anybody. It was just so much pressure, so many things going on. But when I look back on it today, it's made me who I am. So yeah, embrace your decisions, give it all you got. I've got a rock that sits next to my phone, and it's my mantra that I live by, and it says, you must be present to win. No matter where you are, be present. If you're home, be home. If you're at work, be at work. If you're in class, be in class. You got to be present to win. And yeah, it's just embrace your decisions, be there, but if it's time to move on, have the courage to do so. I think we're out of time, right?